And we're live. Good day, whiskey brothers and sisters, and welcome to the Whiskey Book Club's 5th book review and the 5th and final edition of The Language of Whisky. And we have the author with us, Mr. David McNicoll, right beside us. And as always, we're honored to have you, the viewer, and our panel with us today. Our panel right here. My name's Dolph. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society and the founder of the Whiskey Book Club and your host tonight. And as I've said many, many weeks before, I'll tell you a little bit about us if you're just joining us for the first time. We're a bunch of whiskey geeks that love to share a dram and share our passion for reading, mostly about whiskey and whiskey-related activities. The choice of our 5th book is a return to our roots, a return to Scotch. And we've done so for a total of 5 weeks. And we're doing it with our whiskey spirit guide, David McNicoll. You can see him in the top corner, right up there. That's the guy right there. All right. And just a little bit of background on David. He's the author of The Language of Whisky. He is a whiskey aficionado who's born and raised in the Highlands, went to the University of Aberdeen, worked at Blair Athol, owns a travel company called Scottish Roots, which specializes in whiskey and ancestral travel, which you should look up. And David, we should do a plug for it and show them the actual how to get to it online. That'd be good. And he moved to New York 10 years ago. He's been a brand ambassador for several labels. And where he teaches in New York at the Brooklyn Brainery, he teaches all things Scottish. So Dave, Nicole, Kent, Cheryl, and someone called Bearded Dave, he's part of the Alberta Scotch Society. We were present at his class last Thursday night, and I must say, it was fantastic. But let's start our roundtable introductions with your names, your other handles, and what's in your glass, and why you chose that. We'll start with our special guest, David, continue alphabetically with our other panel members, Dave Drew, wife Sheila, Kent, wife Cheryl, and Nicole. And then back to me. You're David.
Thank you, Dol. Well, week number 5. Great to see you all again for the final time. I'm not sure what I'm going to do Saturdays now, but anyway, Slange. I'm David McNicoll. I am also here, obviously, the host of we can do that.
There you go.
Language of Whisky.
Don't hide the name.
And I'm drinking nothing more complicated than a Dewar's White Label. Cheers.
And why Dewar's? Why did you choose Dewar's, David?
I think we've been talking about old Tommy for a wee bit here and there, and I thought that, and also my grandfather worked for Dewar's, so I thought, yeah, bring it home.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's a good choice. David, you're up.
Hey guys,
Dave,
it's
Yukon Dave.
It's Yukon Dave coming from his basement, and I've got the heaviest whiskey bottle in the world. It actually, the top of my box ripped off and it hit the floor and bounced. So this is a Bladnock 10. I got it because I was watching about it on Instagram. So some of that advertising works. You can get me at @YukonDave_EDM.
Perfect. And it's a beautiful bottle, Dave. I enjoyed it. Cheryl, you're up.
Hi, my name's Cheryl. I go by Cheryls_1 on social media. Tonight, I'm drinking a Hazelburn 14-year Oloroso Cap.
And why did you choose that, Cheryl?
I'm doing that to go with sort of the theme of Campbelltown, which is the area we'll be hitting, and I love Oloroso casks, so the two just blend wonderfully.
Oh, I'm right there with you with that love. Kent, you're up.
Hi, my name is Kent. I go by Whiskey Ass on social medias. Also, well, one of my favorite areas. I'm kind of in love with Campbelltown and also liking the cask strength. So I'm going to be sad when this bottle is done. And for a little bit of local flavor, I am doing Buffalo 9. And this is a wonderful stout from Calgary, Alberta.
Thank you very, very, very much. We have a little bit of feedback from somebody, so I'll be clicking people off trying to figure this out in a bit. But Sheila, you're up.
Sheila Cooper and Tony on social medias. I am drinking. What am I drinking? Tonight, Ben Romack's peated. So this is their Seriously Smoky. Let's see. This one's because they come out every yearish in their series. So this one was distilled in 2005, bottled in 2014.
Can we see that bottle?
Oh yeah, it's the old series.
Nice.
Every once
You
in a while.
smoke with it.
So
Nice.
it's 67 ppm.
Thank you
And
very
I
much.
was
And
drinking
Drew.
it, I think, because it was staring at me.
No, it looks good.
It
Yeah.
looked pretty funny.
Yeah, I'm Drew Semper, and today I'm pulling a Dolph. I am double fisting, so I have Ardbeg 10 and Oban 14. So just ones that we've always enjoyed going to, and yeah.
Thank you, kind sir. And Nick, you're up. Last but certainly not least, Nicole.
Hey there, I am Nick, and I go by Black Cat Whiskey on social media. And tonight I am drinking a Adelphi, the Dancing Man blend.
Beautiful. And one of the best blends out there. I think we agreed for the price, right, Nick?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Now, let's get rid of my little thing on the side. I've got the Kilcairn 8-year-old, and this is the very end of it. And as the panel members know, sorry, Dave, you weren't invited, but at last year, December 27th, we had our post-Festivus and Festivus Scotch tasting at my place. And last year was a Campbellton year. It was fantastic. We had a lot of them. And this is the last bit of my Kilcairn 8 that was poured that night. So it's done. And it's a very sad night for that because it was fantastic. I've got another, but I just haven't opened it yet. I'm there. Soon. So, are we ready, ladies and gentlemen? It's a fantastic night. It's a good night, but a sad night. And we'll see this. So, this is in part terribly sad day for us as it marks the end of our time with David. So 5 weeks of Scottish history, Scotland's social history, geography, etymology, personal stories, and camaraderie is coming to an end. So that is terribly sad. You got to hear that. So you've got to feel this with me. On the less sad side, we have one more book club session with David, and we have an after jam session, which we've never done with David before. So that's very exciting for us. And we have a second special guest popping in at one point tonight. So Robin Robinson, who wrote the foreword for the Language of Whisky for David, he's going to pop in possibly during the Whiskey Book Club or the after jam or both. I told him he's invited to both of them come on in. But speaking of Robin, I believe that he hit the nail on the head because I went back and I reread the foreword and I really liked it. And here's my first quote, my first quote of the night, which means there are going to be many to follow. So here we go. The Language of Whisky takes on its own unique pathway. Whiskey isn't just made, it's born of the people of the glens and valleys, of the waterways and the rolling hills of Scotland, each with their own history and magic steeped in antiquity. How's that sound? Now, we've seen and we've experienced that so much over the past month with you, David, and thank you for that. I've got to thank you, really. But something else that many of us experienced together was an online class this past Thursday that we did with David. So that's right. Dave, Kent, Cheryl, Nicole, Bearded Dave, who's part of the Alberta Scotch Society, and I tuned into David's online course, and the title was The History of Scotch, was it not?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Through the Brooklyn Brainery. So my first question is to David. My second one's for the rest of the panel. But David, can you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the Brooklyn Brainery and why did you decide to do it? And the rest of the panel, tell us what you thought of David's class. Put him on the spot. Push a little bit. See what.
Do you want me to leave the room?
Nope. You'll act like you can't hear us. It's good.
You know what? I'm trying to remember how I got involved with them. When I first came to the New York area, and I was here, and I spent about a year waiting for all the paperwork to be completed. So I was not really able to work. But what I was trying to do was involve myself with any whiskey communities that were in New York. I was trying to get involved with whiskey bars and so forth, which there really weren't many of. And there was not a single whiskey club or a whiskey association or anything in New York. So I set up something called the New York Whiskey Academy, which actually still exists. I have a logo. I had it all designed from a friend of mine in Scotland. I've just done nothing with it after I actually got a real job. So it's still there. And so I was sending out letters and I was doing all sorts of things. and I did a tasting at a bar near, it was on McDougall Street, which is south of Howson Street, and I did this tasting they randomly asked me to do. It's called Slane, the bar. It doesn't exist anymore. And somebody came along to the bar and said, oh, you want to get in touch with these people who do night classes. It's called the Brooklyn Brainery. And they gave me an email address. And so I sent them an email, and Jen, who runs the place, got in touch with me and met up with her. I put together this 2-hour plan of a class I would do on the history of Scotch. And she was like, yeah, well, if you want to try it and come along, and we'll pay you for it, and you can do a tasting. And so I did it, and that's the best part. 9 years ago. So I've been doing it. The Scotch class that I do other classes like the history of gin, and I do the history, like the one that's coming up at the end of the month, the history of Scottish folklore. These have all kind of branched out from this core class, and I've done probably one a month for 9 years. And we never cancel it. It's always, not always full, but it's always got a decent pickup on it. And the class that you guys tuned into, I guess if you were to go back in a time machine to the one I did 9 years ago, it would be completely different. I've learned so much on the journey, not only just from researching for the book, but it becomes more and more difficult to compress it all into 2 hours. But yeah, that's how I started it, and I really enjoy it, and I like the feedback, and it's just there's such a great. The Brainery itself is such a great little place to go and learn stuff. You can learn everything from how to fill in your tax returns to the history of the Empire State Building to how to cook Italian food. It's great.
It is fantastic. And Sheila's the one that told me about it originally. And actually, she's the one that gave me your book. And I think it was because of going to the Brooklyn Brainery. Sheila, is that right? All that linked together?
Oh yeah, I took a couple of the classes at the Brooklyn Brainery, David's classes specifically, and he was talking about his book, so I bought his book. And then you were looking for books to read, so I handed out the book and said, "Please, can we read this one?"
So all joined up.
Well, and David said that he would come on with us, so that linked it for me. Then I was going to read it. Otherwise, it would have sat on my pile of like 15 to 20 whiskey books that I still have to read. But you went to the top of the pile, David, and you deserve to be there. It was it.
Thank you.
The next person I'm going to ask, though, is Dave, because he went to 2 of your sessions. He did I think it was gin, Dave?
Yeah, I did the history of gin. It sounded real interesting. So I tuned in a week before the history of whiskey. And I was telling my boss that I'm taking this class. So he sent me a note the day after I took it. He says, "What do you think?" I said, "I believe the guy actually lived all that history. Like, he seemed to be there." It was amazing how you told the story.
Okay.
Like, I could have sworn you were there with those guys in the Netherlands and all that kind of stuff. Like, he just
cool.
I've got to hear this because I was thinking London. I wasn't thinking Netherlands, but that's a story for another day. Kent
well, that's
Sheila.
Geneva. Yeah.
Nope, not Kent and Sheila. Kent and Cheryl. Were you both on that night? Because I didn't see the camera, so I'm not sure which one of you were on or both.
We were both on. We were up in the office, and I don't have a camera on my
what do you guys
work machine. So
show them some love.
So here's the thing. I was talking to a friend of mine about the course today, and I was telling him, it was like, this guy's got so much history. He literally talked for 2 hours. I don't think he took a breath.
It's probably right.
The odd step here and there, but I didn't see you breathing because it was just like blah, 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 blah,
in a good way.
Like, holy cow!
Not a Charlie Brown, Bob.
Yeah, that went south very quickly there. That turned into information overload.
Yeah, it really was. It was an excellent course, and I mean, a lot of we already knew from the last 9 months of doing this, but there was so much that we hadn't heard before. And as to our earlier conversation before we went live, you need to break that up into 5 weeks.
Just like we did.
Yeah,
because we're brilliant and we have great ideas.
Yeah, it was great. Like, seriously, the 2 hours flew by.
Yeah.
Like, it was incredible. It was like, wow, it's been 2 hours already, because it's just so much, and you are so easy to listen to, David. It was a great night.
Well, if you think it goes, I have to figure out where I should be every time I look at my phone where the time is. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be in the Middle Ages anymore. I need to be digging peat somewhere in the Highlands by now.
So I got a question for David. Do you have, like, is there a prompt? You got something that tells you, that keeps you on track, or are you just going off the top of your head kind of thing?
The slides keep me on track in terms of my timing.
Okay, yeah.
But in terms of the narrative, it's no, it's maybe it's the tour guide in me. I have it already. I have it like programmed. I know what I'm going to say, but I don't mean that. That sounds very mechanical, but it's again. When I used to do for telling stories on the tours, like whether it was the history of William Wallace or Mary Queen of Scots or some ghost story, whatever, I have this sort of mental map in my head where I can see the line, I can see the start line and the finish line, and all I need to do in my head is like dip into that moment and bring it out and expand it. That's everything is very visual for me.
Well, I found it really interesting how you would all of a sudden go off on a second story and then come right back again. I thought, man, how does he know his place? You know, he just keeps going here and there and comes back all the time. Yes,
the word is a fluke.
Yeah. I've seen it too many times. I know it's not a fluke.
I guess when you know the story, well, if you know the line of the story, you can you jump in and out, and you kind of like you return to where you're. I don't know. Maybe I don't think about it really, I suppose.
Nick, what do you feel? What do you think?
I would have loved it to have been longer. I'm going to be one of those people. I could have spent hours listening to you, more information. And I was like, oh, I want to know. I'm like, oh, this is too. No, it can't be done. I wanted more, and it was so incredible.
I guess one of the things about it is that you want to spend about the same amount of time on every part of it, and once I realized you are beginning to run out of time, is that I would love to spend as long talking about the 19th century as I would have talked about the 17th century. But I guess the part about the earlier history is that's the bit you don't really read very much about. Nobody really talks about that part of it very much. It's usually post 1823 is where most of the history of Scotch tends to deal with. I guess because there's more information to be found then. You can use much more sort of like there's more. For the want of a better word, there's like posters from advertising, and you can dial into the human beings, the Alexander Walkers and all. But there is that other part which I think gets glossed over, and how it also fits into the grander scheme of Scotland's own history and the history of its people. It doesn't stand alone. It doesn't live in a bubble.
I'm right there with Nicole. I was drinking dram after dram. I had too much in 2 hours because I was watching. And usually I'm thinking about what's the next question? What do I have to do? Who am I pushing? But then I'm just watching you, Dave, and it was great. And my wife was on the side, and she said you can just feel how passionate he is about this.
Yeah,
and she's been around teachers forever, like me and all our friends. Many of our friends are teachers as well. She can see the passion, and I love that. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to stick with what we said and what Kent said again. Maybe it's a 4-class thing, and you squeeze it into 4 classes, and you charge 4 times the amount. And you know what? It was $8.15 Canadian, I think. So $6 American.
$6
paid $25 for a month worth of courses each.
Yeah.
But then again, we all really love going into the deep dive. We're all here with you because we like the deep dive into the books. We don't do a book in one day. We do it in 5. That's what we do. We're good. That's what we like.
So there's
that was good, Chad. That was nice. And I think you felt the life, Davey. You should.
Yes, it was fantastic. It was great to have you all on. So, and I mentioned that to Jen, who runs the place, that there might be some Canadian characters signing up. So of course that's brownie points for me because I'm putting business her way. So
nice.
Cheers.
Nice. Awesome. And just keep telling us what the next ones are, and we'll do it. But then,
I have Jen again next week. It's Jen again next week, and then I've got on the 22nd. I have the Scottish folklore class.
Ooh, nice. And I should do the gin because I want to know what Dave knows now. I'm competitive that way. So as everyone undoubtedly remarked last week, we only covered one region, and we didn't even get to all the questions from the chapter either that I wrote down. So although the Highlands and the mini regions were all phenomenally interesting, I'm really happy to finally get to Campbellton. Now, I believe many of us on the panel, and we've talked about this, have a special place in our hearts for Campbellton distillers. there's not a whole bunch of them, but we do. So panel, please tell us about an interesting fact that you found in this chapter about Campbellton, a favorite expression, and your rationale for the expression if you do that, or something you'd like to know that maybe David could help us with in relation to Campbellton. Or really, go even beyond. Go any subject that we touched on that he didn't talk about and you want to ask him about.
Just fill up your glasses and bash on, folks.
I know. I got my double fist. It's not just Drew. It's good.
Robin
You're here
Robinson's
to
going to
listen.
come on and we're all going to be like this.
That's the way it should be. And I think Robin would appreciate it.
I think he would very much appreciate it.
All right. Anyone want to do that? Interesting fact that you found in this chapter, guys.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the book.
Still.
So I get off easy on this one. I'm getting the book, though, because I've got to have it in my collection. But I would have loved for you to David, to see that picture that you put up last week of Campbelltown with all the smokestacks, because that was interesting. I'm sitting there trying to count the smokestacks. It's like, where's Waldo? How many distilleries were distilling at that time?
Gotta echo what Yukon Dave said. That piece about Campbellton from the course actually was really more interesting than some of the pieces than in the book, and it was more intriguing. I'm like, I sort of perked up a little bit more. I went, oh, wow! And as he said, seeing the picture with all the smokestacks and doing the same thing, trying to count them all and going, wow, there were that many distilleries there, and then it went bust.
Boom. Yeah.
But and there was a good reason, and David talked about it. And you're gonna have to buy the bloody book if you want to find out. Buy the book. It's a good Christmas present.
Yeah,
Just don't buy.
Look.
Just don't buy it, Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yukon Dave can tell you that for sure. Drew and Sheila.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Not so much a quote from the book, but the one I loved when we were in Campbellton was them telling us how many people continuously at low tide walk to the island and they get stuck there and have to be rescued because the tide comes in.
The sandbar.
Yeah, they walk the sandbar out to the island, and then all of a sudden it's like, meh, now I'm here. And they're fish rescue.
I would be so embarrassed that I would wait the night, and hopefully I'd have whiskey on me anyway, so I'd just spend the night. I'd be scared that the whole island might disappear into the ocean a little bit.
Oh no, it's a big island. It's not
It's
going
a big one.
Well, it's not that big.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
It's not good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Firewood with you.
Well, because there's an island off just outside Edinburgh called Cramond Island, which is connected to the it's about 5 miles from the city centre of Edinburgh, and it's you can walk out to it at low tide, but then when the tide comes in, you're stuck on the island, and it's where the local youngsters would take the girls on a couple of dates, and then suddenly the tide was in, and like, oh, well, we're stuck here for the night, eh?
Yeah.
And your father can't find us. So I don't know if they do that nowadays, but certainly I some of the old worthies I used to work with I used to work at the museum in Edinburgh, and there's all these old boys that some of the stories these guys could tell you, ex-coal miners and all sorts of stuff. But Cramond Island was the place that they used to take the girls because they couldn't get back to the mainland.
What's that name in Strawberry Hill? What was the name? I got my thrills on. No, Blueberry Hill, not Strawberry Hill. That's leading me wrong. Like Happy Days, they always had whatever point. So that's the place right there.
Yeah.
We have a question from Bearded Dave, though. So he said, how do you decide what to add to your lesson, what's not relevant? And let's not just say that for the lesson. He saw the lesson, but let's bring that to the book. You were a wealth of knowledge, and when we were watching you on Thursday, Loris was thinking same thing Dave was, that maybe you had a teleprompter because all the facts were coming out and they were fast and furious, and you're always on step. So great. You're a brilliant guy. Let's say you're brilliant. Lots of love coming from the Alberta Scotch Society. But how do you decide what's important and what's not important when it comes to a book this size? And I can appreciate the fact that it is a fairly thin and quickish read. But I love that fact. You poured tons of information, but where do you draw the line, Dave?
Well, evidently by not including a map. I guess you actually probably answered that question 7 years ago when we started this. That I didn't write it so that it would be date follows date follows date, and there was this king and that king and this king and that king. That it wasn't so much about it being a historical book. It was a geographer's book as well. It was also a travel book. So this was a way of me, I guess, in my mind, walking through a landscape of our past. If I wanted to write a book about flavors and flavor profiles and so on, I could have dived deep into that road. And so, but that's so subjective to me. And I'll get to the point where once you've had a couple of Ardbegs, everything tastes like Ardbeg. So I guess the line for me was that it's not so much a line, there was a philosophy, is that I want somebody who really knows their stuff to have learned something from the book. And I want somebody who doesn't know anything about whiskey not to be disenfranchised and thrown off by it. I want someone to learn, that they'll embrace the subject, but also I don't want it to be so, ABC that somebody who really enjoys and knows a bit about it doesn't feel that they'd already. I want them to walk away knowing something they already know.
Perfect.
So that was the line. It was more about not so much drawing a line. It was more about who am I pitching it to, and in the way it's similar to the way I've always done tastings as a brand ambassador. I don't want to bore people who know their stuff, but I don't want to overwhelm people who don't.
Excellent. And Dave likes your answer too. See, done. He's another teacher, another high school teacher. I throw him on there.
Oh, he's already a friend. He's called Dave.
Very good. He's a good guy.
He's also a history buff.
So, and again, let's go back to the post-Festivus whiskey gathering we had. And I want you to think of the Campbellton distilleries that we had. So people on the panel. And we had a lot to drink that night, a lot of different things. And I mean, we had a lot. We had a lot of bottles from Campbellton. It was beautiful. I need you to think of this region. Can you pick a favorite, or maybe if it's not a favorite bottle or distillery, a story about a distillery that endears you to them? A reason why you would pick this bottle as opposed to another. And I know Cheryl would pick one because she loves a sherry influence, but something. Help me out, guys.
Well, the Springbank distillery itself, I love the story behind that. The current owner, who's getting quite up in age, is left the distillery to the town when he's got no heirs. And they employ, like, everything's labor there. There's no mechanical. You hear distilleries have 3 people running, millions of liters a year, whereas Campbelltown, that does, what was it, 200,000 liters a year or something like that. It's run by 90 people. And they literally are the sole employer in the town. And well, also with Campbelltown being kind of way out there, it's hard to get to. It's not something you drive to, in an hour or half an hour. It's a day trip to get there. So, I think that's kind of neat. Just like that endears me to the distillery itself. Never mind, they make some really damn delicious stuff.
Oh, they do. I can agree. Drew and Sheila, you've been there. Tell us why.
Yeah, it's a trip to Calgary.
Yeah, it's
just a more roundabout.
Yeah, it's a really roundabout, weird. You think you're lost 6 times by following the directions, because you start turning down little dirt roads that connect 2 highways and all right. But it's very pretty. It's very pretty, and it's like but it's 3 hours from Glasgow. What was the bottle we brought to his Festivus?
We brought one of the living cask bottles.
Yeah.
From I think we brought. What did you not have? You didn't have Long Row, right? So we brought Long Row, the Long Row living cask. Yep.
And Kent and Cheryl brought a Long Row as well.
No, but we also brought a Kilkerran.
A Kilkerran and
you had what, the 9? If you had the what did you finish tonight?
Mine was the 8. That was the 8.
Ours was the 11.
Strength 8. Okay.
Yeah, ours was the Kilkerran 11.
Nicole, did you end up going to Campbellton when you were in Scotland?
No.
Okay. Why not? Sorry, you can't go to every place. I know. I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry, Nicole.
I went further north.
Good. And it probably took a heck of a long time getting up there. I'm going to continue, guys, just to try to get through some of the questions, because I do have a sizable amount of questions again. I'm sorry. And I also have another quote. Imagine that.
Well, of course.
So here, page 169, right there. There we go. There are clubs, clubs, us, academies and associations, us, ambassadors and masters, writers, and a raft of self-proclaimed experts out there, all of which make it sound like some sort of secret society requiring rites of passage before you get to know whiskey. Hopefully, this book will help peel away some of this and show that Scotch is a drink of the people. So, panel, first question is to you, and it's kind of 3 parts.
Oh,
it's a long question. I'm sorry. Please answer one of the following. Do you agree with this statement? 2, what are your experiences with this, getting into whiskey over time? And 3, when did you feel comfortable being around other whiskey people? Go for that. So, do you agree with the statement? What's your experiences with that statement, the one you're reading there? And when did you feel comfortable around people who you knew would know more than you? How's that?
So I'll go on this one. Was it 5 years ago? I did the first Dram for Fams with the Edmonton Scotch Club.
Yep.
And all the guys were there, and I felt so out of place. I thought, oh, boy, this is not going to go well. And they asked to have one of the directors to get up and give a talk. I thought, oh, great. I got to listen to all these guys talk now. And he gets up and he says, I want to report that my cat is learning Spanish very well, but my dog is not doing so good. And everybody clapped for the guy. And I thought, what the hell's going on? And that put me at ease right away, because they were there to have fun. And they were there to enjoy whiskey. And yeah, the stuffiness went out the door instantly. That was, I'll never forget that.
And 5 years ago, and you also tell the story that when Two Brewers was getting into whiskey, you were pretty apprehensive, right? You didn't know if you were into this stuff.
Well,
this beautiful liquid.
I was having a hard time with national brand whiskey, and I told the boss, and he goes, "Well, that's not what we're making, so don't get those and drink those, because that's not what we're selling." I remember going to Vancouver with our guy Leo there, and he says, "Yeah, I'm really nervous." I said, "What's the problem?" "Well, I don't know a lot about Scotch." I said, here's how you do it. Just take it in and say, "We make this. It's really good. Tell me I'm wrong." And give the guy a sample. I said, "Stop talking. Let the guys tell you that you're either right or you're wrong." Yeah, we did very well with that trick.
It's a very honest approach. Here, it's great. What do you think? Some kind of that. Was your friend like 6'9"?
No.
All right, that's good.
And that's maybe why we have from bottle 10 to 23 right now on the shelf.
Whoops.
Yeah.
So do you agree with the sentiment, guys?
Yes, definitely.
That people make it seem that way. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
no, it's basically just that. Yeah, a lot of the clubs, a lot of the associations, all the rest, lack of a better term, some of the gatekeepers, all the rest, make it seem like it's you have to know so much, or or you can't come in and just enjoy the whiskey. And it's like, no, come to my back door. I'll pour you a drink.
And you two also do, well, you do tastings now. So there's different clubs that we actually give whiskey to. We do talks, but do you think of that when you do presentations, how to keep things kind of
light? Yeah. For example, one of the ones we're doing an upcoming tasting, we decided to do whiskey cocktails. So we've been getting a lot of help from Ken and Cheryl and a bunch of others, because it's just, why not? It's light, it's fun, it's just going to go through there, and we got a stack of different cocktails.
We spent the week testing hot toddies, and I hate cinnamon. It's not been a good week for me.
Hate cinnamon.
You and I, we're on the same boat there. I hate cinnamon.
Oh my God. You're like the only two people I've ever met in my life that don't like cinnamon.
Yeah.
I don't like honey either.
So
hot toddy is good.
What's wrong with you people?
That's it. I'm out.
Oh, we love
Take them all off, Laura. Mute them all.
No.
Oh yeah.
Kent and Cheryl, you guys started this gig with Scotch just about the same time as me, because we got to know each other. We went tasting. So October, November, December, I saw you more than I saw my wife. I did. I'm sure of it. So it was all tastings. But when did you start going to tastings? Because I was a bit apprehensive at first. So I'm wondering when you guys finally made the decision, we're going to start going to Scotch tastings, whiskey.
I don't know when we really started, because we got together in 2010. We both were very entry level into Scotch, and we both generally like the same. Like we both started with the Bruichladdich, and absolutely loved it. We were like, "What is all this other stuff on our shelf?" Well, how do we learn about it? I don't want to go out and spend $100 on a bottle and find out I don't like it. So we went, "Hey, there's a $5 tasting. Let's go." And I was like, hey, "That's awesome." Went to another one. Yeah, and then next thing you know, we're going to, well, again, the Christmas season, you're doing 5 a week, and you're like, holy shit, I'm not like
at least 3. At least 3 a week. He might be exaggerating with 5 sometimes, but there were weeks that there was 3, 4. Now, Nick, I'm going to go to you because you and I been to a lot of tastings together, and you've been in this gig longer than me. I've loved Scotch for 25 years, but I haven't been able to delve into it until probably 8 years ago. You were around before me. You were doing tastings. You were online. You were present. And I saw you at a lot of the tastings as well. So one of the 3 things, I don't know which question you want to answer, but do you agree that it's snobby? Did you have the same experience? And were you comfortable right away, or did you have to force yourself, Nick?
I'm gonna go with the easy. I had to force myself. As much as I enjoy whiskey, I'm not necessarily enjoying going and being stuck around a whole bunch of different people. And especially with whiskey, it is snobby, no matter what, it seems. So it was always a bit of a turnoff until you found like-minded people. And then you're like, oh, hey, I keep seeing you. And I was like, Dolph, I keep seeing you. I'll talk to you. Oh, let's drink a bit more together. And it was great.
And she gave me chocolate too. I used to have the pods to cleanse my palate with the coffee, and I introduced that to Nicole, but she introduced the chocolate to do that. So that was good.
And who? Oh, it was our buddy Blair, wasn't it? That said chocolate's bad for you. It wrecks you.
No, that was Gavin,
and he was really aggressive about it too.
It was Blair. Yeah.
Do not put chocolate in whiskey.
David, I'd like you to wrap this all up if you can, because you've been on the other side. So you've done presentations like most of us with little groups, but you did this, and you're a professional. It was your job. And why did you stay this in your book, for one? Like, what was the sentiment that really pushed you to this? And again, maybe when did you become, because your parents or your grandparents, because you've been around the whiskey industry your whole life, was it really natural to kind of go into it? Because it was forced for me. I had to make the decision. Was it natural for you?
I guess from that standpoint point of view, yeah. I after leaving university, I went to work at Blair Athol. So we working at a distillery was more than just doing the touristy stuff. We used to do a lot of VIP whiskey tastings, and I would do a lot of them, and then colleagues would do them. But when I started there, we had a new boss, because the outgoing boss was off to become something that I'd never heard of before. And my old boss from the same town I grew up with was the global brand ambassador for Johnny Walker. And this guy had like 3 passports glued together. We'd been to Bhutan and all places you were just opening places up. This guy was going there to actually bring the brand, like to actually launch Johnny Walker into certain countries. So this guy was well traveled, and he was the brand ambassador. The industry didn't have things like brand ambassadors even 20 odd years ago. Not really. You might have got the distillery guy to go along and talk to you, whatever. But this was a specific job, this role that Guinness, as it still was, decided that they wanted for him. But when he sat in a tasting, I mean, seriously, I mean, it really was along the lines of, yes, I'm getting raspberries, some strawberries. Is that Labrador? Yes, I'm getting, no, Cocker Spaniel. And we're just like, dude, I just get whiskey. I'm sorry. And then you get the point where there's obviously something wrong with you. You're not smelling what the dude is saying. Well, and it's the same when you buy a lot of these books. It's like you read it, lemongrass, and I remember reading one that said, "This smells like my first day at school." Ooh. Well, I didn't go to your school. What are you talking about? So I felt that there was a disconnect. But me being me, I wanted to plow the lone furrow there. And I guess maybe in a way that's why I've never been that kind of ambassador, which has been very flavor forward, because I just felt that you're going to disenfranchise somebody somewhere if you start telling people what they should be tasting. If you tell somebody what it should taste like, that's what they're going to taste, because otherwise they're going to feel, oh well, I'm not part of this gang. But actually working in the industry itself, each of the brands I've worked for, the industry is obviously it wants to be as inclusive as possible because everybody's a potential customer. So in itself, it doesn't want to have people disenfranchised. So we get trained actually sitting in offices and PowerPoints, the whole kit and caboodle of how to be a brand ambassador that does not disenfranchise, that does not add a level of snobbery. It's to completely knock those walls down and be an everyman. But just as my first whiskey tasting I ever went to in New York, when I realized that it was a possibility, was I wouldn't like to say what age, but it was my birthday. My wife organized it. We went to St. Andrew's Bar in New York. I really had only been here a few months, and the guy doing the tasting was Robin Robinson.
Robin, nice.
So I met Robin Robinson right back, and he did this tasting that went on. It was very involved. He got out staves and he showed where the liquid had gone into in the staves, and then retracted. A lot of talk about bourbon, which I didn't really know much about, and he did it and presented it in a way that the dude with the 4 passports glued together just simply didn't. And I think that informed me about who I should be targeting, and no two tastings are going to be the same.
Well,
excellent.
And I agree with what David said, because I go to tastings to taste the whiskey and get some education, but I also go to watch the presenters. And there's some guys, and I've told some of the stores, I said, I'm not coming back and watching this infomercial again.
Yeah. Well, we were always told, the end of the day, do you like it? If you like it, drink it. It really is as simple as that. If you like it, drink it.
Very good. And I'm going to agree with Nicole said before, it's still snobby. It is. There's a snobbiness to it because you have to know a certain amount to kind of follow the presentation, I think, sometimes. And we've all been around it. We've all read at least 5 books and probably a whole bunch more. And Kent calls himself whiskey ass, but it's we know what we like. We have an understanding of what's there. But I still think that there's people when they go the first times, and I'm thinking of my son and my daughter when they went the first times, they had a hard time following it, and they didn't feel all that comfortable even asking their father for information during the tasting. They didn't want to seem like they didn't understand. So if that's the case, and they've been around me and talking whiskey, and they've bought whiskey for me for probably the last 5 years for Christmas, Father's Day, every possible thing. It's always been whiskey with me. We've talked about it. They've come to tastings. They've helped me do things. If these people are feeling a little bit not at ease, the 20, 21, 22, up to 25-year-olds, I think it's something that maybe we should fix. So I really, really, really like that specific.
Well, in a way, as I said, the way that the industry looks at that is that's a lost market.
Yeah.
So the industry itself doesn't like what you just said because it needs to bridge that gap. And when you get what I said in my quote, those self-appointed experts, that's a part where the industry really they don't really like them very much because they are the gatekeepers. They bring down that barrier. It's about education. Educate your bartender. Educate people around you, but don't be pretentious in doing it. And I think the line it sticks with me when I went training. When I first went to work for Morrison Bowmore, I got a day in the field with Ian McCallum. I don't know if you've come across Ian McCallum, but Ian McCallum was the distillery manager at Auchentoshan. He was a master blender. He comes from one of the roughest parts of Glasgow. The man looks like a bag of Lego, but he's a brilliant guy. And he said there are only people who call themselves experts. And I was like, well, I'm an expert. Yeah, I had half an hour with him, and I knew nothing about whiskey. And he said there are only two people who are experts out there who call themselves experts are distillers and blenders. He actually, the guy who was the Asian market guy, he's like, yeah, I'm a whiskey expert, blah, blah, blah. And Ian went, no, you're not. You've never blended it, and you've never made it. So I always
I like that.
Feels like a conversation I had with David a couple times. You know nothing.
I use the word aficionado. My wife uses alcohol.
I've been introduced a number of times. Oh, Dave's our expert. I said, no, I'm just the oldest guy.
And old's good in this sphere. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue. Got to push this on just a little bit. All of us have read lots of books, and many of them had sections about distilling process and distilling itself. I need to know your favorite fact from this. So chapter 10 was about distilling. Whiskey making and drinking is the title of the chapter. Do you have a favorite fact in there that you would like to share? I've got mine, but I didn't put it into the notes that I sent to everyone because I didn't want Kent to say that that's what I wanted to say. So I need Kent to actually talk before I do. Favorite facts, people?
You know what? I actually didn't have a favorite fact out of that chapter.
Okay.
They was all very good reading, but not one of them really stuck out to me because it was just information.
Okay. Good answer.
Yeah. Well,
anyone else?
Mute.
I'm not going to say favorite fact so much, but the references to the multiple strains of yeast kind of sent me down the searching into the yeast vaults sections and learning about the different yeast repositories that have been held over the years, so that when there was the flooding, I can't remember which distillery was impacted by the flooding, but a couple of years back there was flooding in the distillery, and there was the yeast vaults that actually saved the day because they had strains of the different yeasts held from the distilleries in the yeast vaults. And I'm sorry, my brain is just not always up to par, so if I don't write down the notes, and I didn't write down the notes because I didn't have the questions on time.
That's good. We're not being graded on this.
If people want to go and search for it, there's yeast vaults that actually hold the yeast strains, and you can actually find out all about this, so that there's backups about it, because yeast is actually really important in distilling. And so just in case something happens with it, there's a backup off-site where yeast is held.
Well, back in the day, bourbon distillers, the managers used to take the yeast jugs home with them, just in case there was a fire or flood or even sabotage at the distillery. These guys would take that. They would take the barm, the yeast, and they would take it home with them. I'm not entirely sure why being in your own house is more secure than being in a distillery. Also, I'm not entirely sure how you add that to your household insurance. But they did that for exactly that same reason, because it maintained that. It's almost like Noah's Ark. You've got because obviously for bourbon, almost every distillery has its strain. Not so much for Scotch because it's MX or Maori or whatever, because they're not looking for the organic flavor out of yeast. But for bourbon makers, when I worked at Wild Turkey, Jimmy Russell you could spend a day with Jimmy talking about yeast.
Excellent. Thank you very much, kind sir. So I'm going to have one really quick question before we kind of click off, and we've got a Robin Robinson on the side. But I'm going to ask this before for everybody. So David, your chapter entitled Exit Through the Shop, The Art of Drinking Whiskey. Is it mainly an accumulation of information that you gained as a brand ambassador? Is that where, because it feels like a number of tidbits that you would have gotten in different areas that you're sharing with us at that point. Is it that?
I guess it's an organic process. I start off with a canvas of, as I said right at the beginning, I work in a very visual manner. So hey Robin, I get up and I can drive from my mom and dad's house 10 minutes, and there's a distillery on my doorstep. So you grew up with that. I suppose that you do accumulate bits and pieces from everybody that you work with and talk about. You get one of the great things about working for different brands that is you get to speak with some, really incredible people who have walked the walk and talked the talk. And if you can even just, siphon off 5% of what they can tell you and try in your own mind to cobble it together to make any degree of coherence that someone else is going to enjoy. And I guess it is accumulation, yeah. And the thing is that story isn't finished. That's not the end. That's not sign off and sayonara. This is only one part of that journey.
And you're still picking up the tidbits here and there. I agree.
Every day's school day.
I kind of feel sorry for the people that drink the same whiskey all the time and they only have one whiskey.
Yeah.
Like I just don't get that.
I remember standing in a store.
That's those bourbon people.
Said, I don't drink anything under the. People go, I don't drink anything less than 21 years old. Like, what are you talking about?
My kill
Hey, David, that's everyone that came to your table.
That's why most of it was under the table, Robin.
What's the oldest one you've got?
Every time. Well, my first ever whiskey live tasting, where I wasn't the customer, where I wasn't randomly stalking about the tent in Glasgow, was doing this tasting in Boston, and I'm trying to promote Glen Grant, and we were the first tent as you came in sort of through the door one way, but not through the other way, where they had Ardbeg as the other option. And these people were drinking Ardbeg and then coming around to try Glen Grant, and they were like, "What's your special?" Like, I could give you Hennessy cognac right now, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to what you're going to taste.
I'm going to interrupt because Robin Robinson just came in, and this is his book. And
Robin.
We talked about Robin already. We said hopefully you'll show up now and with the After Dram to talk to David. And he's our next whiskey spirit guide for us. That's what he's going to be. So it's a nice handoff from David to Robin. And we have a lot of whiskey.
David, you're on delay. So what did you just say?
I said good luck.
Good. I didn't like the tone in which you said that, David. So I'm a little wary now.
We'll talk during the After Dram. We're here for another 5 minutes, and we're going to go to the After Dram, which is a lot loosey goosey, and people say whatever the hell they want usually. But on that vein, Nicole had a question for you, and I want to get that into the Whiskey Book Club because she had that, and she asked me if she could ask, and I said, "Are you going to be nice to David?" And she said, "Definitely. No, it's not one of those guys." So, David, Nicole has a question. Please, I would love to hear it.
Reading the book, there's a lot of discussion about whiskey, but there's these little tidbits that speak to the marketing of whiskey. And it's almost like a poke at the marketing, even though it's part of it, it's not necessarily a nice part of it. Was that your intention, or is that subconscious?
Ooh, after 5 weeks to come out with that one. I
want to hear this answer too.
I would say more erring on the side of subconscious. I probably is. I've sat in so many boardrooms, and I've sat around so many discussions with people who come up with the greatest ideas in sliced bread and feel that they're going to implement this and it's going to be amazing. And you're just sitting there going, that is not going to fly. You don't understand your market, or you don't even understand your juice, to be honest with you. And I think that the marketing side of things is, I remember I was at Glengarry Distillery, and way up in the northeastern Highlands, and the distillery manager, sadly the name I can't forget, and we were talking about the water divining and all of this kind of stuff, and we got to the end, and there was myself and there was Johnny from across in California, and this guy, this real dyed in the wool, born and bred guy from Old Meldrum. He goes, at the end of the day, if you guys in New York don't do your job right, it's going to affect me doing my job here in rural Aberdeenshire. And I guess that connection that you have to get the selling part right, because if you can't get it to the consumer, and I think that understanding that the marketing is incredibly important, but the people who often do it, they're you wonder where the aspiration lies in terms of that. So I guess there's a subconscious element of that, having gone through a lot of it. I mean, I've come across people who want to. We talked about that the other week when we talked about the terroir. It's probably more of a marketer's dream to talk about that than it is a distiller's dream. But I wasn't really trying to have a deliberate dig, but I think in there it's a reality check.
Follow-up question, Nicole?
Do you think it's a necessary evil, marketing?
Yes. Well, if you can't sell the juice, then there's no industry.
But do you think it's necessary? Like, a lot of marketing has gotten, in the last 5 years, brands into trouble.
Well, I think that there's a sliding scale in terms of the marketing. You have to market it, at the end of the day. But it's how do you do it? And I've seen the just like flabbergasted amounts of money. I mean, at the end of the day, is it worth spending? Is it worth? Yeah. Hello. Is it worth spending £50,000 or dollars to have a 2-day event at Tales of the Cocktails, or is it worth spending $50,000 on a salary for a brand ambassador in Chicago? Okay. So where does the money walk? Where at the end of the day, this is a pot of cash, and how do you invest it to make the brand happen? So there has to be marketing, but it's how you tailor that marketing, and sometimes it lands in the hands of people who perhaps feel like they've just got a piggy bank and away they go. So it does have to be there, but yes, I think there is also the danger that the tail wags the dog.
All right. That's a great discussion. And you know what? For the first time in 5 weeks, we are going to finish before the 1 hour period. But it's only because we have another hour after it.
Don't worry, Dolph. You finished me more than once over the last.
Thank you. And Robin, hopefully you're there with us. Hopefully, because I have a whole bunch of questions for you in the next section. So
are we jumping off of this? Are we jumping off of this and onto the other one?
That's exactly what we're doing. So we're going to click on this, and I sent the link that came on probably 20 minutes ago to everyone.
Yeah.
So click on that. We'll all be back by 8:15. So
8:15.
Dave just looked that. Yes. Okay. You'll be on right away, Dave, and then everyone else will be on because we're always
good.
So, ladies and gentlemen, whiskey brothers and sisters, we're moving our conversation from this more formalized format to a more relaxed, equally engaging conversation. Author David McNicoll of The Language of Whisky and author Robin Robinson of, and this is a little bit longer of a title actually, The Complete Whiskey Course, a comprehensive tasting school in 10 classes, will be joining us. And really, what better activity is there on a Saturday night than drinking whiskey and spending time with fantastic people? Really, there isn't. So please join us in about 5-10 minutes. It'll be 8:15 when we go on, but everyone else 5-10 minutes, something like that, on this channel for the After Dram. And if you don't want to miss a minute of the next 5 weeks with Robin Robinson, guy right below me here, please click on the like and subscribe button. And everyone, I will see you soon. Thank you very much, and have a fantastic night, guys. Sláinte, guys.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.